We want to thank you for joining us. We have some persons viewing live on GIS. We have some persons joining us by Facebook. We have some persons joining us by YouTube. We're here today for another exciting episode of Advance. And tonight we're speaking about the subject, one male crab in this hole. We have a team that's raring to go. We have persons here in the studio with us, and we have some persons joining us all the way from the USA. I'll introduce our team to you in a moment, right? But I want to let you know I'm happy that you're here tonight, and we look forward to you joining us, because next time we meet, we're going to be discussing the subject. Very interesting. So you're the breadwinner. Just stay tuned. We're going to talk about that. But let me allow you to meet the persons who are with us tonight. We begin in studio on my far right. Tonight we have with us a gentleman that looks distinguished. He has some distinguished titles to his name. I couldn't help but notice that Officer Kustin, I'm missing you, bro.
He's right here.
Right. Okay. There was something about you that struck me. You have been identified as the Caribbean top crime fighter. I want to know about that. And the waiting audience would like to know, right? You're a police officer, you've been in the service for about 14 years, so you have some solid experience, right? I want you to take a minute to tell us something about yourself, officer.
Lovely. So good night to listening audience. I am Detective Consul Kutin, attached to the Special Victims Unit of the Criminal Investigation Department. And as you identified, I am the present holder to the title of Top Caribbean Crime Fighter. It's just a, not just a, but it is a prestige competition throughout the region, including several islands,
right.
Caribbean islands, in which several things are considered in regards to investigation, solving rate, right. method of investigation, right. and effectiveness.
Right.
And luckily, Grenada held the title this year, and I am the one to represent
right.
our small island.
So we're privileged to have you here with us tonight. In what we're going to be discussing, the issue of one male crab in this hole. We have to talk about matters pertaining to domestic violence.
Yes.
Right? And who else but the Caribbean top crime fighter to lead us in this charge? Officer, right next to you is a distinguished woman. She is here in an interesting capacity. We're talking about things pertaining to men, but we have in our company a distinguished lawyer. What I noted was Miss Lawyer Simon deals with family law and child protection in Ontario. So Miss Lawyer Simon, you have to explain to us about your tentacles and how is it you work in Toronto, but you're also here and you're into this family law and so on. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I was COVIDed, meaning COVID came 2020, I decided to stay.
Right.
So I was called to the bar first in Ontario, and there I practiced primarily family law and immigration law. And two issues that I come up about quite often is one, domestic violence, and poverty, because those two usually intersect. I also practice here in Grenada. So in Grenada, I do a little bit of everything. So okay. In a nutshell, that's basically what I do.
Very well, very well. All right, we want to thank you for joining us. We have with us Miss Elaine Henry McQueen. And Miss McQueen has a lot of experience as it relates to gender issues and domestic violence. So Ms. McQueen, we want to invite you to share with us a little bit about yourself tonight. She is the person who coordinates the UN-run Spotlight program. So Ms. McQueen, why don't you share some insights with us about what you do and the service that you provide us in Grenada. Ms. McQueen?
Hi, good evening everyone. Good evening to you. I'm really, really pleased to be here. I greet you from yes, I work with the United Nations coordinating this project called the Grenada Spotlight Initiative to End Violence Against Women and Girls, which is a program that has received funding primarily from the EU, the European Union, and so I'm pleased to share with you on that. We are also, well, I have been a volunteer in the work to end violence against women and girls and to achieve gender equality for over 30 years. About 15 or so of those years, I have been working in this field with Gino and then with the ministry as the head of the national gender machinery. So I am pleased to share from that perspective with you as well.
All right, very well. We want to thank you for joining us tonight. And we have joining us all the way from the USA, Dr. Mona Qualis. Dr. Qualis holds a PhD as a health psychologist. She is Grenadian. So one of the things we try to do when we deliver these shows is stretch our tentacles across the water and be able to leverage the resources that our people have outside of country. What we're looking for is that we don't just talk here on this show, but we start the discussion that would lead to meaningful action, because the issues we're discussing are serious issues, right? The issues pertaining to men's health have not received the attention it deserves, and we're happy that folks like the PS at Ministry of Health says once it's men's health, she's on, she's supporting, right? So PS, we want to thank you for supporting. Dr. Qualis, tell us something about yourself and the work that you do.
Everyone. Yeah, I'm here. Good evening, everyone. It's really an honor to be back here speaking with all of you today. My work has really surrounded working with families. And so in any capacity, when you work with families, there is going to be the issue of domestic violence that comes up. There's also intimate partner violence that also occurs. But I think one of the huge things that I have learned is just the need to talk about it and the need to discuss it. And it's something that's not an open conversation. And where I am right now in New York, we have a huge community here of folks from Grenada, from the Caribbean in whole.
That's true.
But the conversations around domestic abuse doesn't often happen. And so that's a families, it affects men, it affects our whole community. So it's really important that we have very transparent and open dialogues when someone goes through something like domestic violence, which can be connected to a lot of shame.
Right, so. Very well. Well, I want my technical team to throw up a picture so that we could get this discussion going, because we have a lot to talk about. I want you to look at, because the question was asked, how did we come up with this title, One Male Crab in This Hole? And I am a nature fan. And I looked at this image and I want to share it with you. That's the image of the crabs. My technical team will put it on display for you. Now, the male fiddler crabs are barely 2 inches, but they put great effort into growing claws, officer, right? And these claws could be more than half the weight of these little creatures. The claws are used as a tool, a weapon, right? Now, one of these claws could produce 4 times the force needed to crush another crabs to bits. In their world, however, the rule is 1 male crab in this hole. So they don't jester. There's a contest of power, right? And the fight is over ladies. So the biggest crab wins, right? When we come to humans, we have situations that cause us to have conflict. And the question is, how are they resolved? What we've seen is that there's a history of excesses, right? And you're in a position, all of you are in position for us to speak about it. I want to share these facts that I gleaned from the Central Statistics Office as it pertains to households in Grenada and their dependency, right? As far as households where there is 1 male running that home and no children, 14% of the household surveys fit that category. 1 male crab in that hole, right? As far as households where there are adults, seniors only, and no children, 11% of the household surveyed fits that category. As far as it pertains to household where there are a combination of adults, 11% fit that category, right? So it seems that a lot of men are living alone in Grenada. And it provides occasion probably for conflict when they're in a home situation and things don't work as they would like. We have some questions that we have pinned and we want to jump right into it. Now, I have learned that a lot of things that we deal with start from the time we were small. So there are some messages that are conveyed to youths that could be a problem, right? So I want us to talk about it and share with our audience what are some of these things that we probably take for granted, right? That when we speak to our children, that convey messages that could affect them later in life in their relationships, right? Things like boys don't cry, and things like take it like a man, and things like stop acting like a girl, and things like you have to be strong. Let's talk about it. Right? Psychologist might be a good place for us to begin. Psychologist Mona, how are these messages problematic as it relates to men being men in our society?
So I think one of the biggest problems when we talk about this expectation of masculinity from a young age is it makes the natural state of that individual, if he's male. Some people, regardless if you're male or female, they're going to be more sensitive. Some people are more in tune with their feelings. That is just that person. So when you say someone don't cry or take it like a man, it also puts a negative spin on what it means to be female. It puts a negative spin on what it means to be female, and it causes what really is a rift. So at times, I think when we give these messaging to little boys, it's also when we give these messaging to them. If it's after a spanking, if it's after abuse, if it's after you speak to them in a certain way. And I think one of the things that people often forget is how children internalize messaging.
Okay.
Because I think one of the biggest things when we talk about abuse and when abuse takes place, it's oftentimes not the child's fault. The parent could be dealing with stress. The parent could have other issues going on, and it's the child is the one who is now receiving the brunt of that. The same thing in a partnership. If there is a partner who is upset, let's say over a big issue after the pandemic, is unemployment, not having enough money to cover expenses, not feeling like, the roles are equal in the house, not liking how someone talks to you. But if something is instilled that to present yourself in a certain way is negative, to let someone talk to you in a certain way is negative, instead of teaching someone, it's okay to be frustrated, it's okay to have these emotions, here are the tools that you use. If your immediate reaction to them is to hit them, if your immediate reaction to them is to scream and yell, or to withhold, like love, so the silent treatment is a big thing. It affects kids. It's a layered thing, and they learn from that.
Okay.
So all we always have to think about is messaging. What are you saying? How are you saying it? And when are you saying it? And all those things are really important to how they affect youth as they grow up.
Okay. So I'm getting from you, Doc, that these messages could actually shape how men behave in later life. Right, you want to elaborate on that a little bit, and we want to invite the rest of our team to comment and chime in as the thoughts come to them. Right, Officer, I think you're in a position to be able to speak on what you've seen based on the role that you play. So I really want to hear from you. Right, yes, Doc. So how do these messages shape the behavior that causes the conflict that we see in the homes?
I think one of the biggest things is oftentimes the messaging that many men have gotten is silence. So there isn't a complicit or explicit expectation that we're taught to talk your feelings out, have a conversation, or at times if you're too angry to step away. You don't have to engage right now. It's also okay to step away. I think oftentimes when children are young and they're growing up, how you see your parents or people in your life deal with conflict is how you learn to deal with conflict.
Okay.
How you see them deal with stress is how you learn to deal with stress.
All right, very well. So, Dr. Officer,
Yes.
Tell us from your experience, what have you seen with regards to the behavior of the male characters that you deal with, as we look at what might have happened to them as they were growing up?
Right. So firstly, I must start with identifying my office.
Go ahead.
Right, the Special Victims Unit deals with three categories of offenses. And they are sexual violence, domestic violence, and child abuse.
Okay.
Right? Oftentimes, I get to meet these males when they are oftentimes offenders.
Oh, okay.
Right?
After the fact.
Most of the times.
Right.
After the fact. And sitting with these men, here they speak. Oftentimes, it tells me that they are in a position where they were taught from a child upwards to hold their emotions.
Wow.
Right? And they may be in a household with a partner, a female partner. And I would draw reference to section 133B of the criminal code. Right? And this is one thing that a lot of people overlook.
Right.
Especially female partners, partners generally, they overlook this.
Right.
Now, this section in law speaks to obscene language, threatening language, insulting language, abusive, violent language, a malor song, right?
Yes.
That cause annoyance to another person. Now, what I've seen that the male, oftentimes, will be in a household and they are victims of domestic violence, verbal abuse.
The male is the victim.
Most of the times. And what I've seen is that the male will undergo these verbal abuse, these insults for long period of time. And they come to a point where now they retaliate physically, lash out against the partner, and this is when now the police comes in. And what I've seen in the past, and which our office tried to address, is not just dealing with the issue of the violence, but to try to go back to the source. And as I said initially, speaking with these male, these are their cries. They have undergone for a long time verbal abuse, being told all sorts of degrading names, call, right? And there's no one to speak with because they were taught not to speak of their emotions. And they suppress it, not understanding that they are social beings. We are social beings.
Okay, very well. So I'm hearing from you that there is a side of the coin that we're familiar with. And probably that is where the work of Miss Henry might come in, where there is violence towards women and girls, right? But there's a problem that we need to look at before that pertains to the health of the man. What has been happening with this person that causes him to retaliate or react in that way? Not that he is correct.
No.
But we have to talk about the issues, right?
Yes.
I think when we look at and consider the subject, one male crab in this home, is because somebody is trying to settle and wrest power. Right? So we need to look at that. So I'm curious to understand from you, experts on this subject, why do people stay in unhealthy relationships? Is there a different reason why women stay versus why men stay?
Well, from my perspective, oftentimes I believe the reasons are the same. Sometimes for financial stability, because of a public figure, Mr. and Mrs. Who, they don't want maybe in a church, they don't want people to look at them as breaking up their home, so they would remain in a toxic relationship and undergo these stressful environments, right? So in short, what I'm saying is that the reason can be the same, just as a female, as to why we remain in toxic relationship. Sometimes it may be different.
Yes. Miss McQueen and Doctor, let me take Miss McQueen first. From your experience, why do people remain in toxic relationships?
There was a study done in Grenada in 2018 asking about domestic violence, intimate partner violence in particular, and sexual abuse as well. But in relation to intimate partner violence, one of the questions had to do with why do women, it was a survey about women's experience of intimate partner violence and sexual abuse. And the question was about what are the reasons they did not seek help. And the reasons that emerged were that they were embarrassed or ashamed or afraid that they would not be believed or that they would be blamed for the violence that they experienced. Right? So one of the things was that they were afraid that they would be blamed. So blaming the victim is one of the surest ways to prevent victims from speaking out. Whether that victim is male or female, but blaming the victim. So that was it topped that. Another reason was that they thought that the violence or the abuse was normal, or it was not serious enough to call the police or to seek help. We have normalized, the society has normalized violence. In other words, abusive behavior happens and we think it is okay. That's just normal behavior. That's what it means to be in a relationship. We have accepted it as okay, even though it's hurtful, but we've accepted it.
Right. So
we have the society also, well, the women said that they were afraid of more violence if they report it, that or they were threatened that if they report it, they will suffer greater levels of violence. They also believe that they will not be helped, that there was nothing available for them, so there was no point in reporting it, that the relationship would end. They also wanted to maintain relationships even though it was abusive, that it would bring bad name to the family, that even though they're the victim or the survivor, that their reporting of the violence would bring bad name to the family, and that they were also afraid of losing children. So these were the reasons given in the study.
Right. I'm hearing. Go ahead.
Yeah. So linking that back to an earlier question that you asked about the qualities and so on, about what the messages that boys receive, and I dare say that girls receive as well, because girls and boys are in the same society receiving the same messages. So boys and girls are taught how to be masculine and how to be feminine. There's no one way, so we refer to them as masculinities and femininities. And there are some characteristics that are taught traditionally to men and boys and women and girls about what masculinities mean. Things like being in charge, head, strong, dominant, owners of women and girls. And women and girls are taught, and that's where the gender divide comes in. Women and girls are taught that females and boys and men also learn that women are expected to be fragile or weak and vulnerable, emotional, gentle, submissive, and that women and girls belong to men and boys. So there is a relationship of ownership that our society teaches, that then allows us to think that abuse is normal and violence is okay, and that we would be blamed for that kind of violence.
So I'm curious for us to broach the subject, what it is and what's the case when the male is on the receiving end of the challenges. I got the signal that we need to take a break. When we come back, we'll be discussing that. In the meantime, viewers, we're going to have some bush tea. We have a curious mix presented by one of our cooperative members, and I'm going to introduce the officer to something that we learned last time, that there are some things that we could do for our men folk, so at G-Links we've sensitized and put the pieces together and crafted the officer something called Pro-Man. I'll tell you about it during the break. Pro-Man. We take a break and we'll be right back to continue this discussion. We have a lot to talk about. We look forward to joining you.
Grenada, the time for the national census is here again. Interviewers will be visiting your homes to gather information about you and your family. The data you provide determines budget allocation for health, grant funding for community projects, and government assistance for families and the elderly. The census is required by law, and so is your participation. We assure you that your information will be kept confidential. Do your part, stand up and be counted, because we all count in this census. For more information about the census and your participation, contact the Grenada Central Statistical Office at 440-1369 or cso@cso.gov.gd. Grenada, the time for the national census is here again. Interviewers will be visiting your homes to gather information about you and your family. The data you provide determines budget allocation for health, grant funding for community projects, and government assistance for families and the elderly. The census is required by law, and so is your participation. We assure you that your information will be kept confidential. Do your part. Stand up and be counted, because we all count in this census. For more information about the census and your participation, contact the Grenada Central Statistical Office at 440-1369 or cso@cso.gov.gd.
We want to thank you for staying with us. We are back and we're going to continue that discussion, but I want to let you know next time we meet we'll be discussing the subject. So you're the breadwinner, you have to be here, right? Don't miss it. We always send that flyer. It's a blue flyer with some pretty colors at the bottom. The colors are the people that we call partners. You see their logo. We spoke a lot about food here on this show, and some of these persons are people who provide healthy, wholesome Grenadian food. We have to get our people eating local, buying local, and supporting the small businesses in Grenada. Our partners, we want to thank you for sharing. These are people who believe in what we do. We don't get any money from them, but we get their support, and we want to thank you all for being part of this. We're back and we want to move forward with that discussion. There was a point that you raised while we took that break, officer, that I wish for you to share, and I want to also hear Dr. Mona's comments on those points. So go ahead, Doc. Officer.
Yes. Right. So I just want to draw the attention to the last point was made with respect to the top reasons why female remain in intimate partner violence relationships. It's important to note that males also undergo these exact reasons for staying.
Interesting,
right?
yes.
And even more so, keep in context with men's health, is a very stressful situation to undergo, knowing that what society expects of you. You know, that if you come forward to the police for assistance,
you're in trouble.
You look down at.
The message was that men supposed to be strong.
Exactly.
Right. So what's interesting is, officer, I had a personal encounter a few weeks ago of a man that was in trouble. The woman had him well cornered. He gets some good blows, but I hide. I couldn't make myself known, but I witnessed it. And I thought about this guy and his children. What's it like for his son, knowing that your father getting licks?
Yes.
Right?
And ego is a big thing for a male, because most of the time you would find that female academically excel, and you see that the male will drop out of school most of the time, some of the times, more so than females, and they will go straight into the work field. And that would put them at a disadvantage in relationship, and then you get yourself misparent. And that in itself
important, yes.
Pose a
challenge.
A challenge.
So we want to speak to our young men in this country. You need to stay in school. Right? And just as the lady folk are acquiring education, don't check for the money now, check for the money later. The one coming later bigger, better. You could put you in a better position to deal with your peers, right? The woman that you would get now is a good lady, but probably if you wait a little while and get an education, you'll be in a better position to maybe even choose, because those educated girls as well want men. Right? They have choice though.
Yes.
Right?
Sure.
And the men who are not well educated are disadvantaged. So we want to recommend to our brothers, spend a little time, invest more in your education, think about your future, and don't get tied up with trying to deal with now at the expense, because you may be one of those persons who the lady is the male crab. And she's trying to put you out the hole. Watch it, boys. Watch it. Right? I think we need to deal with this question, though. Right? And I want you all to weigh in. Dr. Mona, I want to hear you on this one. What's going on regarding the health of the persons who are abusers or the persons who are abused? There has to be something health-wise going on. Right? I heard a comment. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in a little bit to clarify that last set of comments about you know, the women being the male crab and things like that. Listen, women and men have been existing traditionally in situations where there's inequality, right? And several centuries ago, actually, it's a long time, that decades anyway, that women have started to craft their own destiny, right? And begged and sought and pleaded and marched and struggled for the rights that were guaranteed to men to to trickle down to women, and that eventually that they get an equal share in it. So it is not that very long ago. It's only in the 1960s, for example, that we've seen more and more women enter universities, and even into the 70s. You know, that's not that long ago. We're hearing of the first woman to have studied this and the first woman to have gone to a certain university and so on, right? The first woman to have held certain jobs. So we have to recognize that this is coming from a history of patriarchy, a history of man in power, a history of women not having any or very little of the rights that were afforded to men and boys, right? So in the context of women seeking to have a higher education, in the context of women now seeking to earn better incomes and being able to independently support themselves, I urge us to recognize that we're talking about equality and women having that equal right to do that, and that their right to do that is not a threat to men. We recognize and we appreciate and we hope that men and boys would also learn, continue to go in school and earn higher incomes and all of that. But it is not a competition.
I'm clear that
not to treat it as a competition.
No. We're very clear in the angle that we're taking. We're not suggesting that it's a competition at all. As a matter of fact, as you raise that point, it calls us to consider the situation of excesses. When in the spirit and the urge and urgency to make up, some women do act as if they are the man in the house and they bully their mates, right? They boil them around because they're making more money. So we don't want to spend too much time debating the issue. There's a lot more for us to discuss. What we're focusing on here tonight is the issues as it relates to men's health. When we're in situations where there is abuse going on, we think clearly that something has to be wrong with either the party who is receiving or the party who is administering. And I think it's something that we need to examine, right? I heard the words when the team spoke before that there are some mental health concerns, right? So I want the experts to weigh in on that. Dr. Mona, you want to weigh in on that? What is going on with regards to the health of the persons who are the abusers or the persons who are being abused? And I see Officer Kutain is getting ready to make some comments. Yes, Dr. Mona.
So I think one of the things that was touched on by Miss Elaine that I think we should also pay attention to is the whole idea of patriarchy when it comes to men's health. And the whole idea of patriarchy is also very problematic for men because it always presents a very narrow definition of what it means to be a man. Mm-hmm. And so in life, we all experience stress. In life, we all are going to experience ups and downs, right. But how you learn and are taught to deal with those ups and downs and the spectrum with which you're actually able to express emotions is key.
Right.
And right now, culturally and in tradition, how men can express themselves is very narrow. How society expects them to be masculine is very narrow. Mm-hmm. So if you have a personality that doesn't fit into this very small box, that's a very stressful experience. If you are someone who doesn't fit the stereotypical idea of what it means to be a man, it's a stereotypical definition of what it means to be a man. It can be very stressful. Mm-hmm. So even when we talk about the idea of mental health, and when we talk about depression, when we talk about anxiety, when we talk about stress, men are not given the same ability or don't have the same opportunities to talk about it in the same way. Anxiety is a very real thing. Stress is a very real thing. Being spoken to and verbally abused is a very real thing. I think when we talk about issues that have to go with men's health, the biggest thing that we always overlook is what have men explicitly been taught. And if we're being honest, as a woman, there are much more things growing up that are explicit. Don't do this, you should do this, don't do that. But a lot of times people assume that when men become or graduate from being boys to men, that there are just certain things they're going to know. And that's not the case.
True.
And so when we talk about a society and when we want a society to grow, one of the biggest things we also have to do is allow our boys, when they mature to men, to have a wider girth of how they express themselves, of the ways in which we talk to them, of the expectations that we have of them. Because right now it's very narrow. And if you continue to define masculinity as something very narrow, if you don't fit into that box, you're going to have anger, you're going to have aggression, you're going to fight back because you feel as if, no one's understanding me or no one's hearing me, or, oh gosh, someone might see that I'm not what they think I am, or they don't have the expectation of me. So I think one of the biggest things that we as a society have to do is really break out of this idea of what we expect or think or narrowly define what it means to be a man. There is more than simply providing.
Okay.
There is more than bringing home a paycheck. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? Those things are also important to any individual. But particularly when we talk about men's health, the more that you keep physically inside, and this is a conversation I don't think we have often, stress kills. And a lot of things are internalized. And at a certain point, when individuals can't hold and bottle things up anymore, they explode.
Wow.
Oftentimes in men, it can be in two ways. It can be self-harming, or it can be outward.
Okay.
And so when we talk about this, both of those things are very important. You want individuals to be healthy and whole and to communicate and get things off their chest, but you also don't want victims, or also don't want individuals to become victims so that, they allow people to abuse them or they themselves become abusers.
Okay.
But that requires a two-way conversation.
Right.
That requires us looking at society, but also looking at the individuals in society and what they've experienced.
Okay. I'm hearing you harping on some things we learned in our previous discussions, that there's some things that we do unintentionally as parents that turn back and cause men to grow a certain way, right? Okay. So it's not okay for you to say that something offend you as a man. You're supposed to hold it, right? It's okay for the girl to be more explicit, right? But it turns out that the men don't have the skill, is what I'm hearing from you, to be able to deal with some of those issues, and then they turn out and react and respond in ways that cause problems, right? And bring expression. So I want to hear from the lawyer about the whole notion of what it means to be a man, a good man. And then, of course, I want to hear from Officer Kuti, and I see he's smiling. A lot of things are passing through your mind based on your experience. So let's hear from the lawyer.
So what I've noticed in my practice, and I had a file a few weeks ago, and the gentleman, one of the things he said, it's become a woman's world. And so what we see now is that a lot of men feel as though they have no rights, so it's that power dynamics. I've lost my power. And that goes back to the way that we look at domestic violence, where instead of being proactive, we are reactive. So we're not teaching our men and boys in terms of how to deal with the issues. How do you deal with anger? How do you deal with frustrations? How do you deal with anxiety? How do you deal with mental health issues? And so what we see is, okay, the woman is a victim of domestic violence, and then what happens is that automatically she gets treatment. And a lot of the times in my practice, my clients, some of them get frustrated because I said, yes, we will deal with your challenges, but we also have to deal with the challenges of the man. Because what happens is, remember, especially if he's a father, he doesn't know how to deal with the issue of fatherhood. He doesn't know how to deal with his ex-partner, and he's going to perpetrate the same thing when he goes on to another partner. So first thing you come in, I said, listen, go do a counseling course, go do a parenting course, because I think that education is an important component. Right.
Okay, Officer, you're itching to say a few things. Share your thoughts with us.
I must say that Dr. Qualis, her points was brilliantly brought across.
Right.
It is something that I've seen and experienced daily in my line of work.
Right.
And honestly, I feel it, and I'm an advocate for men, really, because I know how it is that we have emotions. Our emotions are oftentimes left unnoticed.
Okay.
We would like to hear at the end of the day, how was your day? And not to be in a bar, per se, around the wrong company who can't necessarily help you.
Because in the bar, the men are also hiding.
Yes.
Because remember, men don't talk about the issues.
And it's a front. And the advice and discussions that is held in these forums is oftentimes damaging to an individual.
I'm with you.
You know, so what I would say this time, really, men, it is a myth that the law is not for you. It is a myth to say that there's not help. It is our business, our responsibility to look out for our own interests and to develop ourselves and become better individual day by day.
Right.
Right? So these topics are very essential for today.
Right.
Especially to keeping in mind with the spectrum of sexualities. You know, that's a whole different kettle of fish to discuss. Right? But men's health is something that is very pertinent in having a better society. It's very pertinent to become better fathers and having healthy relationships.
All right, very good.
Yes.
So we'll take a break. We get a signal. We'll make it short. But when we come back, I want us to talk about how does domestic violence due to power struggles in the home affect relationships in that home, male to male. For example, the father and his son or his stepson when there is domestic violence, right? How does it affect the male to male relationship, a brother to a brother? Right, so we'll have a little bite on that when we return, and we have a few things that we want to talk about. We want to thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to us being again able to meet the next time we have a show. When we come back, I'll tell you about what's in the cup, what we've been drinking.
Yes.
All right, let's take a break.
COVID-19 spreads from person to person.
We want to welcome you back. We thank you for joining us. We have some people joining us on Facebook. Don't be shy. Share the link. Let people know that we're having some healthy discussions. We have some distinguished guests here tonight. And while we were at break, we were drinking some bush tea. Right? So the bush tea here by Mount Parnassus Plantation has a mixture of cinnamon and moringa and bay leaf and lemongrass, right? Good thing. Look for the Mount Parnassus Plantation sign. And we talk about Pro Man a little later, right? This is a herbal mix too with honey. Good for men. I'll tell you about it. Right? Okay. The question on the floor is, how does domestic violence due to this power struggle really affect relationships in the home, the male-to-male relationships, the father and the son, the father and his stepson, right? Or even brothers, right? Somebody, Dr. Qualis, you want to venture to share some remarks on that for us?
Sure. So I think anytime there's violence in the homes, because each individual in the home is different, it's going to affect them differently. So sometimes you have kids who are so severely abused that when they have kids themselves, they'll tell you, I'll never touch them. So I won't ever touch them. That's something I never want to do to my kids. And then on the flip side, you'll have someone who was verbally or physically abused themselves and think that that's the norm. So they carry that into their relationship. They carry that into parenthood. Also, when domestic abuse happens, it sometimes can cause rifts in families. So if a child sees that their mom is being abused, if a child sees that their dad is being abused, they could also start having feelings of resentment towards that parent. And so what it does is just complicate the violence and complicate the tensions and stress in the household. Because you can have, and this is oftentimes we've seen this happen, where children try to protect their parents. If a parent is being abused and they love that parent, they're going to try to protect them. That can also make the child a target, but that also then complicates the family dynamic because there's not any feelings of trust. That child is going to be on high alert. And also when it comes to the parent, depending on if the parent stays or the parent leaves, that is also teaching the child, okay, this is what I should expect. That is also going to teach the child's sometimes you might also hear or see a child get frustrated with a parent because they're like, why are you tolerating that? Why are you allowing that to happen? So it creates a very complicated dynamic in the household because the household isn't a safe place. It's not a safe place for emotions. It's a place where you have to be on high alert. You have to be willing to protect yourself. But it then also creates a very complicated dynamic, and if you can trust those that you live within.
Okay.
So it's something that it's hard to pinpoint, but it's something that really does create a very contentious and unhealthy environment.
Okay. All right. Officer Scootin, you want to comment on that at all?
Well, I like to draw reference to, I like definitions, right? As it relates to the Domestic Violence Act 2010, right? It's domestic violence is defined as any controlling or abusive behavior that harms the health. It can be the physical health or mental health, safety or well-being of a person or any child.
Right.
And many don't understand that. It is it's any controlling behavior. It goes simple as this. You're in a household, and as the male who we recognize as the authority figure, I am not ruling out the respect to the female, equality and equity. No, I hold that thoroughly. But control, let's go as simple as this. You have the male in a home and he has no control. I'm not saying dictatorship. Let's say the partner in the house or even the son, he can do what he wants. And that father, the male in the home, doesn't have a say. That will cause problems. It'll be contentious.
Right.
You know? And we need to recognize that even as intimate partners, that we cannot dictate to a person, you can't do this, you can't use your phone, and put rules where they ought not to be.
Okay.
This will cause potential for problems and struggles.
Right. Okay.
You know?
Very well. All right. So how do we treat with this notion then, or concern about mental health? Lawyer, you want to venture to share some remarks?
I think as I've said before, is we look at a cradle to grave example where from the time you're small, you're socialized a certain way, and then as you grow, you keep in with that socialization. What I see happening in Toronto is that there's lots of training. There's lots of training in terms of mental health. And I think, from what I've seen, when I came, I went to every police station with ACP Prince, and we talked about, how do you deal with the issues of, violence, domestic violence, child abuse, sexual abuse, the areas that you, Officer Coutain, talked about. And one of the things we had to do was sensitize the officers so that, when somebody comes and says, I have a problem, that you would certainly get assistance. And I think mental health is an important part, and that's why, we're talking about men's health. So education is important. I cannot stress that enough. Our men, last night when we had our discussion, or prep discussion, one of the things we talked about was whether, once you come into the legal system, that it should be mandatory for you to get some form of mental health testing, because so that opened up a can of worms. I think we ended up having a constitutional discourse. Officer Coutain picked up on that, and so the reality is that if you are acting a certain way, as Dr. Kwale says, is there the issue of mental health? Is it something that we have to address? If you're arguing, you're shouting, you're hitting somebody when, it's not necessary, is, something a little bit wrong, should I say? That Officer Coutain is shaking his head. Yes. So I think that's important.
All right, very well. Okay. Yes, I'm hearing someone.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Share with us.
Yes. The health of the offender and the victim and the health situation in the household is extremely important. The issue of the mental health of the abuser or the perpetrator shouldn't, I just urge us to look at it from the perspective as well that the problem of intimate partner violence, domestic abuse in a broader sense, is bigger than one individual. So it is not only about the individuals who are caught or reported to have who are committing the violence, but it is a social problem. It is a structural problem of inequality between the sexes, right? So if that, and we accept that as the root cause, then it means that while we are thinking about the mental health of the persons who might be reported or the persons who might be before the law, before the court, and so on, we also have to take into account the broader social issue, the generalized problems of masturbation issue that we've spoken about, and recognizing that both men and women, and of course boys and girls, have to learn to live together as equals, right? And that if we break down that burden on men about controlling women and the need to prove that they're the man crab, right? That need to prove that they're the boss and so on, then even the pressures of mental health that you're speaking about would ease, and they would have that opportunity to, but the society shuts it down. But they would then have the opportunity to express their emotions and all of that in a safer space. And therefore, let us take it back to that addressing the masculinities issue. But when we speak about health, let's also talk about physical health, because that is important too.
Right.
And of course, the most extreme form of physical issue is killing, right? So last Monday evening, 8 days ago, 2 news stories topped the headlines in Grenada, right? One was that a man killed a woman, his child's mother, and that is a few years after he had chopped her hand off. So that was Monday last week. We heard that story, the 31st of October, right? And on that same evening, in that same newscast, another story was that a young man was found guilty of capital murder. Capital murder because he was convicted of raping and strangling a young woman, his girlfriend or intimate partner of some sort, and left her to rot under a house.
Right?
Yeah.
Serious stuff.
So those 2 women lost their lives, and that was in the story a week ago. Of course, there are other physical things. There are physical injuries. Both men and women may suffer. There are unintended pregnancies, sexually transmitted infections, including through rape, right? There is issues of headaches and stress and things that lead to heart disease and so on later on, and sleep difficulties.
Right.
There are issues of other forms of all kinds of sexual violence. And of course, the mental health issues of depression and post-traumatic stress disorder and so on. So it's a whole range of health issues.
Right.
One of the things we have to be mindful about is that this pressure on men to prove manhood can also hurt him.
All right, you're correct. And let me share a comment from one of our users. We have Marius who is saying that, look, a lot of men sacrifice their health, right, to help heal their partners, right? And he's saying they go through that stress for financial reasons. At the end, this person is saying they ended up being mistreated. So, and he is left to try to heal himself with no finances. So it brings us to an interesting question that we have here on the paper. User, we want to thank you for sharing your comment, and we want to encourage other viewers and users to share their comments. It brings us to this question here. What can we do what can men do to keep each other accountable? So after this discussion, how do our men folk now work towards keeping one another accountable, right? Officer, from your unit, what is it that your unit would like to see?
A lot, actually, that we would like to see in respect to men and their health. We would like to see a reduction foremost, a reduction of crime, a reduction of seeing men being the major offenders.
Offenders, right?
Yeah, we want to see a reduction in that. We want to see men speaking out.
Speaking out.
Yes, I love the comment by one of our viewers on Facebook. He's speaking out. He's sharing his views.
He's sharing his views.
Yeah, because a lot of men are mistreated.
Yeah.
A lot of men are left there to defend by themselves,
Right.
having done all they can do, sacrifice their health, you know, long hours, all their finances, all their savings is going into their kids, and they are good men. There are a lot of good men in Grenada who are supporting their families. And they are just left there by the wayside to fend for themselves without any support.
And part of the problem is because they don't have the skill to articulate well. Or there isn't a forum that allows them to speak about it. As a man, you ain't supposed to talk. You got to keep it quiet, right? So we want to tell our brothers that it's okay to speak, right? And we have, I think I heard in our pre-discussion that there are some issues we need to address that can be contributors to the problem, right? The abuse of alcohol, I think, is a key concern of the police. They think the police is of the opinion that maybe our society has too free access to it because it puts a lot of people in a position where they're out of control, right? So we want our people to be a little bit more conscious. It's a big business, we understand, but there's some rules. So I think a brother needs to tell a brother, it's time to stop drink. Or drink something else, drink some Pro Man. Yeah, or drink some bush tea. All right, drink some bush tea. Lawyer, I want to hear from you. What are some of the key areas of legal reform that we may think of considering so that we could decrease incidents of domestic violence?
I stress again on education.
Education.
Counseling.
Counseling.
In terms of, and as I said earlier, one of the things that we can possibly do is when somebody comes into the system, that, you know, they're tested in terms of mental health, they're given ample education, because a lot of the times it's not provided.
Right.
And so we see that going, and I think it's also important that, you know, we in the legal fraternity learn to use a holistic approach to help our clients.
Okay.
So it's not only I'm helping you with your legal matter, and this is how I practice. You know, I would always say I'm part lawyer, part social worker, where I help you with the other aspects of your life.
Right.
And like this gentleman, you know, if he comes to see me, the one who was talking, he comes to see me, I'm like, okay, well, maybe you need help with finances, and so I'll put you here, I'll put you there, as opposed to, okay, let's deal with the issue of
very well. Right. We probably could have time for one more question before we close, and then we'll get some final words from the clients. But do we need to create, officer and lawyer, a specialist court for victims of domestic violence?
I would agree. I would agree, yes, that you know, we have a specialized courts with individuals who have specialty in terms of that area, because it's a difficult area, you understand, as well as the issue of access to justice, where as a victim of domestic violence, you know, I go to a certain place and I can get help. So I think we discussed this before in terms of where do you go, who do you turn to, whether you're male or female. So I think those two areas, specialized courts and access to justice, are two areas that we should be looking at in terms of giving more assistance.
What have you seen, officer?
Well, what I've seen so far at the courts, it is working, but I believe I would join with you that there should be a specialized court. In fact, where the service rendered, they can be more adequate to addressing the issues as they come along. You know, because it takes a little bit more sensitivity in dealing with family matters.
Okay.
You know, and with this also, I'd like to draw reference to one of our viewers
on
our YouTube channel.
Right.
who spoke about mothers doing a lot. We are not forgetting the mothers.
Right.
No, but we're just trying to be in context with the topic of men's health.
Right.
We know women has been going by and far by themselves supporting the kids, and we commend you.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, but we want men to understand they too need to come up.
Yes.
You know, and if you're doing a job, we want to give you the support.
Correct.
So we are taking everyone in consideration.
Correct.
But we are more focusing on men's health and how we
tonight.
can improve men
to function better
in their homes and society.
Right, yeah. And how many is there adequate access in the legal system for dealing with these kind of issues? Do you have any idea as to the statistics from?
Well, so the questions there is twofold. So first, I would say yes, there's adequate service at the Special Victims Unit, RGPF, by and large. We are a entity that does not operate by ourselves. We work along with even Spotlight Initiative.
Okay.
We work along with other entities like Child Protection Authority, Ministry of Social Development, Gender-Based Violence Unit, Probations Unit.
Okay.
Because we understand addressing issues of men and women in society, it's a collective effort.
Okay.
Right? So yes, we work towards reducing crime and creating a better society. Right? In respect to statistics, since the enlistment of the Special Victims Unit in 2018, we have seen about 15 to 16 matters where male has come forward as being victim of domestic and sexual violence.
Wow, interesting.
In comparison to last year, we have seen 5 cases of male come forward in sexual violence, and for this we had 2 so far.
Okay.
But what I've noticed is that the males are all under 16 for last year to this year.
Okay.
So it calls for concern.
A call for concern.
Yeah, that males are also victims.
Also victims.
Yeah, and we all need help.
We all need help. So I'm hearing that there is some education that we need to do, right? And we need to encourage. And when you spoke of counseling a moment ago, the notion that we have is that this is only for people that whack.
No.
That's the notion that we have. That's only for people that whack. But what we're saying is that it should be more accessible. And they are normal, good, working people who need help, right? So we need our people to come forward. If you're a male, don't be shy to say that you went to counseling, because these people are skilled and they can help you get over legitimate problems, right? That's why they have that specialty, right? And it's not something to be ashamed of. That call goes on both sides, both for the practitioners, we believe, and also for the persons who are in need of service. That is okay to outreach for service, right? So I heard that the RGPF is working closely with several entities, and we want to commend your team. We want to thank you for coming. We want to go to the lawyer for your closing comments.
I think, you know, I'm not going to compare what I've seen in Toronto compared to what I've seen in Grenada. That they, you know, there's too much dynamics there. But I think, you know, that I must commend officers like Officer Coutain and the legal fraternity, as well as all the partners. Like, you know, we have things like Spotlight Initiative in terms of, and this program in terms of really being able to look at men's health and how it affects the man himself, how it affects him as a father, as a partner, as a brother, and how it affects the issue of domestic violence, because basically they are, you know, they're interchangeable. And so I must say we've come a long way, and there's still a long way to go. You know, the road is continuous.
All right, very well. Let's move to Ms. McQueen. Give us your closing comment.
All right, sure. I just want to say that I encourage us to go, as we go forward, to look at this problem using a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
And one of the pillars of that approach is that there has to be adequate services and coordinated services for victims and survivors of violence, intimate partner violence, and other forms of gender-based violence.
Okay.
That those services should aim to protect victims and to empower them.
Okay.
so that they can stand for themselves
All right, very
as
well.
well and emerge from it. So that's one pillar. A second set of things or pillar has to do with holding offenders accountable, whether those offenders are male or female.
Right.
Currently, the majority of the offenders are males. Holding men accountable, holding all offenders accountable is critical. And that's where the law and the court and the police and so come in. But it is also linked to rehabilitation. And offenders can also seek rehabilitation through counseling and so on.
Okay.
And as you said, it is not about being whacked. It's about recognizing that you have a problem and you would like to get help for it.
Very well.
And therefore, that is a way of, as a man, or a woman who is an offender, taking personal responsibility and holding your own self accountable as well, and seeking help to change that behavior so you will not be abusive to partners and others as well. But we need to hold offenders accountable, because offenders do not have a right to commit violence against any other human being, and they definitely don't have a right to get away with it, and so they have to be held accountable. Right? And the third thing is that we need to ensure that we approach the prevention. Make sure that we know what the root causes are, and the root here in relation to intimate partner violence and other forms of domestic violence, the root is embedded in masculinities and femininities and inequality between the sexes, gender inequality and discrimination, stereotypes, and this body. And therefore, as a society and as a program, I encourage you to continue this, but as a society in general, let us work towards changing those traditional notions or ideas about what it means to be a man and how to prove to be a man crab, and so on, and create a society where men and women learn to live peacefully, harmoniously with each other, and support each other, rather than trying to pull and tear each other down as crabs in a barrel.
Very well.
So let us look towards a harmonious, peaceful society where both men and women are safe in their homes, safe in their communities as well.
Thank you. I'm hearing you calling for a lot of education, Ms. McQueen, right? So we're hoping that coming out of this springboard discussion, we can put the structures in place that would allow us to inform and educate our people better. From this program, right, the series that we've done, there has been a lot of education, right? We've learned a lot of facts that we didn't know, from things pertaining to food to practices and so on, right? So this conversation is useful for us to take that. Well, let's hear from Dr. Qualis, her closing comments, and then permit me kindly to share some comments from the audience as we move. Dr. Qualis?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that has been repeated and circulated tonight is really the importance of talking and having conversation. But I think on both sides of the table, it's the importance of also being open. I think that oftentimes, culturally and traditionally, there are too many assumptions that are held on how someone should react to someone and how people should be in a space. And specifically when it comes to men, there's a lot of expectations. And I think we've all learned, especially in the past 2 years, just how stressful any situation can be. COVID was a very stressful time. Folks lost jobs. There's a lot of changing in household dynamics. People are home with their kids. People are home with their families. There are different and newer dynamics that people experienced for the first time. And ideally, what we really want as a society is a healthy and whole society. In order for that to happen, it really does require that we have support groups in place. It does also require that as a society, that when someone does make a mistake, that when someone does have a lapse in judgment, we offer the resources for actual rehabilitation. I think oftentimes when we talk about accountability and responsibility as a community, we don't uphold that. But a court, if we are a brother's keeper, if we are working in community with someone, that also does mean that when someone goes through the channels and is learning from their mistakes, that they are re-entered and allowed to really recommune with the society. I do think on a huge level, when we talk about men, men and women have been on this earth together for decades, for centuries. Because time changes and things change, we also have to be open to that. When women have gained the opportunity to gain more authority in certain places, that's not a negative thing. One should want a partner, or one should want someone in their family to always reach their highest potential. And so when we talk about men as well, we want you to reach your highest potential. The only way you can do that is if you're happy and whole. And so one of the biggest things that I really hope that is taken away from this conversation is really the idea of supporting one another. It's really the idea of having conversations, uncomfortable conversations, but it's also tapping into your body, because one of the biggest things I think that oftentimes is forgotten is when you feel very strong emotions, whether it's anger or sadness or frustration, you feel it in your body. And so it's really a call for men to really tap into their body, because ultimately your emotions and your feelings impact your physical and mental health. And we want everyone to be healthy and whole.
Right. Well, I shouldn't allow us to leave and not take a few comments from our audience. Right. Someone called Sir AMB said these words: "This discussion is overdue." Right? We think that this forum provides us an opportunity for us to deal with some uncomfortable conversations. What we want to come out of this is more than just the talk. We want our people to be proactive and look at how we could, in meaningful ways, put the stepping stones so that we could effect change. Right? We have spoken too much, and now we need to act. Why I'm saying that is because we're at the point where we have access to a lot of intelligent power in our country. Right? We have educated and powerful females. We have educated and powerful males. I mean, look at this. Tonight, we're in the company of the Caribbean's best crime fighter. Right? Officer, we want to commend you for your achievement. You make us proud. We're proud of what you're doing and the force is doing. And that all this is important. Right, my people, the police force in Grenada is standing out. We're producing quality men. We need to give these men our support and encourage them, right? And we want to commend the leaders of the force for being able to put the structures in place so that people like you can excel, right? And we want that title to stay in Grenada. We need partners to come on board who can commit with joining hands with the efforts of folks like you at the force so that we could be progressive. We want to thank Ms. McQueen for the work that she is doing and partnering again with your unit. And we want to thank professionals like Dr. Qualis. We want to also drop a line on those persons out in the diaspora who have the resources. Your resource can be the education and the service. Think about it. What if SVU identifies 5 men who need special service? Can we get you, the professionals in the diaspora, to offer 5 hours, not plenty, 5 hours free, so that SVU could call you and say, listen, talk to man A, B, and C for us because they have a problem. Right? Those are small stepping stones. We don't have to try to build a new hospital for that. These are small things that we could do. So we want to encourage our people to step forward, get in touch with the SVU if you have access to those resources and you can make a contribution so that there could be meaningful change. Ms. McQueen asked for us to begin to work together in a way so that we could solve the problem. I want to thank everybody for viewing. We're going to have an exciting time next time we meet. It's the last in this sequence. We've started a series of 6, but by no means would it be the last time with us. We look forward to that continued partnership. We want to thank the persons who have given out their logos and look for the logo. Right? These are the people that are making sterling contributions. If you have a health concern, don't forget, check it out. Ask about the Pro Man. It's good stuff. Right? We want to thank everybody and we wish you a safe evening. Thank you for being with us.